Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into a new stack of source material today.
Yep. And our mission really is to unpack one specific source. It's got a highly critical take on a recent political moment.
That's right. We're going to be looking at its view on figures like Harry Reid, James Comey, and that whole controversy around Russian election interference.
Exactly. Now, we need to say this right up front.
Yeah.
This source uses really strong opinions. And the language,
Yeah.
well, it's intense. Some might find it offensive.
Yeah.
Definitely unfair.
For sure. So our goal here isn't to endorse any of it, okay? Not the claims, not the tone. It's just to walk you through what this specific source said.
Right. So you can understand its particular viewpoint, its arguments. We're just exploring its world.
Not validating it.
Yeah.
And a central figure that this source really focuses on is former Senator Harry Reid.
Yeah, heavily.
So let's start there. How does this source actually characterize Harry Reid? It sounds like it sets a pretty negative tone from the get-go.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, right away, the source uses unusually harsh language, derogatory terms.
Like what?
Well, it calls him things like douchebag, a political parasite, dirty Harry. It even uses a comparison to, and this is a quote, crap from a horse's ass.
Wow. Okay, so no punches pulled there. That gives you a very clear sense of the source's framing right away.
An intensely negative one, yes.
Yeah.
And it quickly pivots to a specific incident to sort of back this up. A comment attributed to Reid in the book Game Change.
Okay, what was that?
So the source quotes Reid describing Barack Obama, saying he was light-skinned and with no Negro dialect unless he wanted to have one. That's the quote presented.
And the source has an interpretation of that comment.
It does. The source claims this suggests Reid believes light-skinned African Americans are somehow superior, and that Reid prefers what the source calls nice white voices.
Okay. And then the source criticizes the reaction, or lack thereof.
Exactly. It critiques what it sees as a lack of backlash against Reid for this, from groups that label social justice warriors, the Democratic establishment, even media figures like Al Sharpton.
Right, and the source contrasts that with how it thinks a Republican would have been treated for saying something similar.
Precisely. A sharp contrast. It also, interestingly, notes that Reid endorsed Hillary Clinton, who the source describes as having much lighter skin than Barack Obama, before making that comment about Obama. And it also throws in the claim that Clinton, quote, has a strong Negro dialect when she wants to.
So the source seems to be weaving these points together to suggest, what, a kind of double standard?
Yeah, that seems to be the argument. A perceived double standard in how political figures and the media react, depending on who's speaking.
Okay. So building on this critical view of Reid's character, the source then shifts focus a bit to his later statements.
Right. It turns to statements he made after retiring, specifically about Russian President Vladimir Putin and his alleged direct involvement in election interference.
What did Reid say, according to the source?
It quotes Reid from his final press conference. He was asked about Putin's direct involvement, and he reportedly said, "From what I understand, the answer is clearly yes."
Clearly, yes.
And the source includes Reid's follow-up, where he kind of connects it to Putin's KGB past and his denial of involvement.
And the source's main criticism here isn't just the claim itself, but the reaction, or lack of reaction.
Exactly. That's the core point the source makes. That in its view, nobody in the press corps asked Reid for proof.
No ironclad evidence, as the source puts it.
Right, no demand for that kind of evidence to back up such a significant claim. The source then asserts that, quote, neither political puppets nor the mainstream media is interested in holding anybody's feet to the fire.
Strong words again.
Very. And it also points out that the Associated Press did report that the Kremlin denied Reid's assertion. Call it laughable nonsense.
So the source uses that denial, perhaps, to highlight what it sees as an unsubstantiated claim going unchallenged by the media.
That seems to be the implication, yes. It fits the pattern.
And this critical lens extends to Reid's conflict with James Comey, the former FBI director.
It does. The source mentions Reid had been criticizing Comey for months prior.
And what was Reid's main accusation against Comey, as presented in this source?
Well, according to the source, Reid accused Comey of trying to cover up ties between the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
While also interfering in the election. In the final weeks.
Yes, that's the dual accusation presented. The source quotes from Reid's letter to Comey.
What did it say?
It quotes Reid writing, "It has become clear that you possess explosive information about close ties and coordination between Donald Trump, his top advisors, and the Russian government."
Okay. And the source also mentions Reid called for Comey to resign.
Yes, and it reports Reid predicting Comey wouldn't resign, claiming Comey was, quote, basking in the glow of the election.
Right. Now, you said the source pivots here. It presents its own counterargument.
Exactly. This is where the source really pushes back against Reid's narrative and offers a very, very different framing of Comey and his actions.
And I imagine, given the tone so far, the source's depiction of Comey is probably also quite negative, using similar strong language.
Oh, absolutely. Intensely negative and offensive. Again, the source claims Comey is disconnected from reality.
Okay.
And it says he, quote, gave the Wicked Witch of Wall Street, referring to Hillary Clinton, a pass on her private email server.
Wow. Okay, so again, we have to stress this is the source's extremely derogatory language for Clinton, similar to what it used for Reid.
Yes, very important to note. The source uses this kind of framing to dismiss both Comey and Clinton while making its point about the email server situation.
So the source quotes Reid saying Comey did a disservice, interfered with the election, calling it beyond all precedent, even suggesting Comey should lead the RNC because he seemed partisan.
Right. Reid's position is presented clearly, but then the source hits back with its counter, which is that, in the source's view, Reid should actually, quote, be thanking Comey for keeping Clinton out of prison.
Ah. So the source argues Comey's actions didn't harm Clinton, but actually helped her by not pursuing charges over the emails.
That's the core of its counterargument, a complete flip of Reid's accusation.
Okay, let's touch on a couple of other things the source brings up to kind of bolster its case. There was something about Reid's past statements about taxes.
Yes, exactly. The source digs up an old interview where Harry Reid supposedly said paying taxes was strictly voluntary.
Voluntary.
That's what the source claims he said. It quotes phrases attributed to Reid like, I don't think we force people, and taxation is not forceful, and a voluntary tax system.
And how does the source react to that?
With ridicule, basically. It points out the obvious consequences of not paying taxes or, force, fines, potential imprisonment.
Right.
So it uses this to paint Reid's statement as contradictory or, well, nonsensical. Another way to undermine his credibility, it seems.
Okay. And this skepticism seems to extend to the whole idea of Russian interference determining the election outcome.
Yes, the source expresses broader skepticism about the narrative that Russia hacked the election and gave the presidency to Trump.
And it focuses this skepticism on something specific, a letter.
It does. It focuses on what it calls an open letter from elector Christine Pelosi.
And what's the source's issue with this letter?
It raises two main points, or critiques. First, it questions the very idea of expecting an honest answer from James Clapper.
The former director of national intelligence.
Right. The source calls Clapper a known liar and links him to an organization that, in its view, specializes in misinformation. So it's attacking the credibility of the potential information source.
Undermining Clapper to undermine the letter's premise.
Pretty much. And second, while the source acknowledges what it calls duplicity in the letter's language, it says the letter clearly does identify Russia as the reason Trump won. And then it demands proof. It demands ironclad evidence. It actually uses that old phrase, where's the beef, regarding Russia's specific role in the, quote, election process.
Where's the beef? Okay. So that demand for concrete evidence is a recurring theme.
Absolutely central. Okay, so let's try to unpack this a bit, what the source is doing here. It's weaving together all these different threads, right?
Yeah, Reid's past comments, his later claims about Putin, and the whole conflict with Comey, these critiques of figures like Clapper.
And always, always circling back to this demand for specific concrete evidence, proof, ironclad evidence.
That it's using that incredibly strong, often offensive language throughout as a tool, it seems, to dismiss the figures and narratives it opposes.
Definitely. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, it means understanding this one specific, highly critical perspective on these really complex political events.
It shows how one particular viewpoint connects different moments in time, demands a very specific standard of evidence, and uses a very particular aggressive tone to frame its arguments and, frankly, to attack those it disagrees with.
Yeah. Navigating challenging source material like this with such a strong viewpoint and language is definitely part of the deep dive process.
And thanks for exploring this specific viewpoint with us. It's definitely a perspective that, while it might be difficult to engage with because of the tone and the language, it's clearly trying to build a case based on its own interpretation of events and this constant demand for a certain kind of proof.
So Drawing directly from that recurring theme in the source of the constant asking for proof, for ironclad evidence, the questioning of sources like James Clapper, here's maybe a final thought for you.
Okay.
Considering the source's relentless focus on proof and source credibility, how do you navigate the sheer amount of information out there? How do you evaluate claims, especially in these really charged political discussions where different sides demand different kinds of evidence and dismiss others entirely?
Yeah, that's something to think about. Keep exploring.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.